I've always loved flying. The excitement of takeoff, the quiet hum of the engines, the way time seems to blur between departure and arrival. But this time, something went wrong. I was on a red-eye flight from New York to London. The plane was full, but everything was normal. Families settling in, business travelers flipping through paperwork, the soft chime of the seatbelt sign turning off after takeoff. For the first few hours, it was just like any other flight, until it wasn't. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the captain's voice crackled over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a slight delay in landing clearance at Heathrow. Nothing to worry about. We'll be in a holding pattern until we receive further instructions." Murmurs spread through the cabin. I glanced at my watch, 6:45 a.m. Just a minor delay, nothing unusual. But an hour passed, then two. The sky outside was still pitch black. I checked the in-flight map. We were circling over the same stretch of ocean. Every time I looked, the screen hadn't changed. Then came the second announcement. "Folks, we're still awaiting clearance. We appreciate your patience." Something in the pilot's voice made my stomach tighten. He sounded uncertain. After 5 hours, people should have been restless. The babies should have been crying. The crew should have been handing out food. But no one complained. No one was hungry. I wasn't hungry. In fact, I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten. That's when I noticed the clock on my seatback screen. 6:45 a.m., the exact same time as before. My chest tightened. I turned to the woman beside me. "Hey, do you have the time?" She smiled politely. "It's 6:45. I felt a cold wave of panic. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Same time as always." Her smile didn't fade. I pressed my face against the window. The sky was wrong. It wasn't night, and it wasn't dawn. Just endless darkness. No sun, no stars, no city lights below. I stumbled toward the flight attendants at the galley. "How long have we been in the air?" I asked. They exchanged uneasy glances. One of them forced a smile. "We'll be landing soon, sir." She turned away too quickly. I grabbed her arm. "Tell me the truth." Her expression flickered, just for a second. And then she whispered, "I don't remember when we took off." I stared at her. Neither did I. Passengers were starting to act strange. Some stared blankly at their screens. Others sat perfectly still, unblinking. A man across the aisle just kept smiling. That's when the intercom crackled again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're preparing for descent. Flight crew, take your seats." Relief flooded through me. But as I looked around, no one reacted. No one looked relieved. Then I saw it. On my seatback screen, the in-flight map had changed. We were descending, but not toward London, not toward anywhere, just into blackness. I felt a surge of panic. I had to do something. I ran toward the cockpit, pounding on the door. "Let us out!" The door suddenly swung open. Inside, the cockpit was empty. The controls moved on their own. The radio hissed with static. The captain's voice, calm, steady, echoed from nowhere. "We'll be landing soon." I stumbled back, my mind racing. This wasn't real. I squeezed my eyes shut and forced myself to remember. The last thing I could recall, the airport, my boarding pass, my name. Something shifted. The hum of the engines wavered. I kept repeating my name, where I was. This wasn't real. Then, a loud snap. The plane shuddered violently. I gasped, and suddenly, I was back in my seat. The sun was rising outside. The cabin was full of normal, restless passengers. The pilot's voice came on, cheerful. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now beginning our descent into London Heathrow. Estimated arrival time, 6:45 a.m. I felt dizzy. Had I imagined everything? But as I glanced at my seatback screen, my stomach clenched. For just a second, before the screen blinked to normal, I saw the in-flight map, and we were still circling. Flying alone is usually a gamble. You never know who you'll be sitting next to. So when I boarded my red-eye flight and saw that the seat beside me was empty, I felt a wave of relief. A whole row to myself? Perfect. The flight took off smoothly, and as the cabin lights dimmed, I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the soft hum of the engines lull me into a light sleep. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. I woke up to a chill, not just a light breeze, but an icy coldness pressing against my right arm. I rubbed at my sleeve, assuming it was just the cabin air conditioning. But as I shifted in my seat, I felt it again, like someone was sitting there. I turned my head, my breath catching in my throat. The seat beside me was still empty, but the fabric was creased, the cushions slightly indented, as if someone unseen had just settled in. A strange, creeping unease spread through me. I slowly reached out and pressed my hand against the seat. It was freezing. I pulled my hand back quickly, my heart pounding. Maybe I was just imagining it. Maybe the plane's ventilation was blowing cold air unevenly. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The seatbelt buckle lifted slightly, then clicked into place, on its own. I inhaled sharply, glancing around to see if anyone else had noticed. But the cabin was quiet, passengers dozing off, lost in movies, completely unaware. I was about to call for a flight attendant when I heard it. A whisper, soft, almost imperceptible, right next to my ear. Finally. I froze. The voice was faint, like a breath of air slipping between the static of the engines. I turned sharply, but the seat was empty. My stomach twisted. I didn't know what to do. Do I call someone? Do I pretend I didn't hear it? Then, something even worse happened. Out of the corner of my eye, on the dark screen of my seatback TV, I saw a reflection, a blurred figure sitting beside me, and it was smiling. Panic surged through me. I had to do something. I squeezed my eyes shut and gripped my armrests, forcing myself to breathe. I thought back to something I once read, ghosts, spirits, lingering energy. They don't belong where they are. I slowly turned to the empty seat, exhaling shakily, and I whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." For a moment, nothing happened. The air remained cold, the weight in the seat still present. Then, a sudden warmth. The chill lifted, like a breath had exhaled from the space beside me. I looked again. The seat was smooth, uncreased, empty. The whisper was gone. I sat there for the rest of the flight, wide awake, heart pounding. When we finally landed, I grabbed my bag and rushed off the plane as quickly as I could. As I passed a flight attendant, I hesitated before asking, "Was someone supposed to be sitting next to me?" She frowned, checking her list. "No, sir. That seat was unassigned for this flight." I nodded, forcing a smile, and walked away. But just before I stepped out of the terminal, I glanced at the plane one last time. Through the small cabin window, in my row, the seatbelt on the empty seat was still fastened, like someone never left. I travel a lot for work, and at this point boarding a plane is just another routine. Get through security, find my seat, pop in my earbuds, and wait for takeoff. This flight was no different, or so I thought. As I was making my way down the jet bridge, I felt a strange chill in the air. A whisper of cold that didn't make sense in the crowded, overheated space. That's when I heard it. A soft voice, barely more than a breath coming from just behind me. "This plane is going to crash." I stopped in my tracks, turning sharply, but no one was there. Passengers were filing in, busy with their luggage, chatting, shuffling to their seats. I shook it off. Probably just my imagination. I was tired. Maybe I misheard someone. I kept moving. As I stepped onto the plane, I glanced down at my boarding pass. Row 23, Seat A, window seat. I started walking down the aisle, scanning the seat numbers. That's when I saw her. A woman sitting near the front. She was pale, with dark hair pulled back into a loose braid. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, and she wore an expression that was unsettlingly blank. She was staring straight ahead, unmoving. Something about her felt off. But I kept walking. A few rows later, I glanced to my left, and my stomach dropped. She was there again. Same pale skin, same dark braid, same eerie stillness. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. That wasn't possible. I walked faster, but as I passed each row, I saw her again, and again. She was in every row, identical, sitting in seat after seat, staring ahead, unblinking. By the time I reached my row, my hands were shaking. I dropped into my seat, heart pounding, telling myself this wasn't real. I looked to my right. The aisle was normal again. No duplicates, no impossible reflections. I exhaled shakily. Just exhaustion. Just my mind playing tricks on me. That's all it was. Right? The plane filled up, passengers settling in. A flight attendant passed by, giving the usual safety spiel. And then, a whisper. "You have to get off this plane." The voice was right beside me. I turned my head slowly. She was sitting next to me, the same woman, the same blank expression. But now, she was looking right at me. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Her lips parted slightly. "This plane is going to crash." I opened my mouth to say something, to ask who she was, what she wanted, but then the plane lurched. The overhead lights flickered. The engines gave a low, unsettling groan. And suddenly every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get out. I don't know what came over me. I unbuckled my seatbelt before the plane even started taxiing and stumbled into the aisle. People stared. A flight attendant rushed over. "Sir, you need to take your seat." I barely heard her. "I have to get off." My voice shook. "Something's wrong. I can't be on this plane." More eyes turned toward me. I knew how I must have looked. Panicked, paranoid, crazy. The attendant tried to reassure me, but I wasn't listening. I pushed past her, nearly running toward the exit. Somehow, I convinced them to let me off. The moment my feet touched the solid ground of the jet bridge, I felt an overwhelming relief. I turned back, breathless, watching as the flight attendants shut the door. Through the small window in the aircraft door, I saw the passengers settling in. And then I saw her. Sitting calmly in my seat, staring directly at me, I stood at the gate, watching through the window as the plane taxied away. Then, just as it reached the runway, an announcement came over the loudspeakers. "Attention passengers, Flight 237 to Chicago has been grounded due to mechanical failure. All passengers will be deboarding shortly." My legs nearly gave out beneath me. I watched as every single passenger exited the plane safely. If we had taken off, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know who she was. But she saved my life.